Accordingly, from the Centre for the Use of Research and Evidence in Education, and
I'm Helen Timperley from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. We've got all the research to say teachers make a difference, but I think that's putting a lot on teachers to say, well, it's up to you now. And so we have to have a system level response to provide opportunities for teachers to learn the new skills and knowledge that we need for them to make a difference. And so much professional development is not tied to student outcomes. So when I was asked if I'd do a synthesis of the literature that related directly to student outcomes, that's what got me interested. I wouldn't have been interested if it had just been about teaching practice, because in our synthesis we showed that sometimes teachers change practice and there was no improvement in outcomes. So that's what got me motivated.
two things got me started. First of all, I did an evaluation for 3 years of the links between teachers in service education experiences and their classroom practice for a very big city in England, at the same time as doing some larger scale academic research. And running the two things in parallel, I began to be aware of some of the problems, because there was very little linkage, as you say, or little attempt to link the in-service education with student learning, or teachers' aspirations for their students. And at the same time, this academic research I was doing was getting huge plaudits from the academic community and cited all over the place. But it took me another 2 years to figure out how to make it useful, and so that's why I started to think you have to work on the use of research and evidence.
Yeah.
And we put together a group of 30 teachers, 15 retired teachers and 15 serving teachers, and said, what kind of synthesised knowledge about CPD would be useful to you? And for them, it was exactly this point you made, that they said, we want it to be about collaboration, and we want it to be about what kinds of learning for teachers, when they're working together, makes a difference for students. And the academic advisors who were working with us said, well, you'll never find any studies. You won't find any studies that track that through. And we were really delighted to find there were some. We definitely found the same strong effects for students, whether or not people were conscripts or volunteers. But the evidence that seemed to link to that was talking together about whatever the research finding their CPD was organised around meant for their own students.
Yes.
There was a conversation about what this means for the community of students who inspire me, or who, and what my aspirations are for them.
Yes.
That the minute they could stop talking about the research as the thing and start talking about what the research meant for their students was the moment at which the engagement happened.
Yes, so the students have to be the reason they engage, that they're there, and students have to, sort of better outcomes for students have to be the criteria in which they judge effectiveness. I had to finish the work and then take a step back and then think about, well, what's common to all the studies that did have a high impact on students, and it was very much developing teachers' inquiry skills that also developed their knowledge at the same time. So as I said, the rationale for engagement was about their students and what they knew and what they needed to know, and then for the teachers, with the help of the specialists, this is not something I think teachers can do alone, to work out, well, what is it they needed to learn and do to help the students, that the ones that were not succeeding so well. And then developing those self-regulatory skills of saying, okay, well, we've learned some things, we've changed our practice, are we making a difference? And I believe that's within the grasp of teachers. It's a challenge, because working out your own learning needs, working out what you need to do, say with help, because it's not something we can do on our own. It's not just teachers. I don't think I could do it on my own. And then going around that cycle constantly. We've worked out what our students know and do. We've worked out what they need to know. We've figured out what we need to learn and do, and then just checking all the time, is it making a difference? Because some of the professional development studies we read, teachers changed their practice. They did exactly what the person who was involved, the trainer, suggested, but there's no change in student outcomes. So that's why I feel quite passionate about this checking, was it making a difference?
the research helps us hold that promise for teachers being pushier and having higher expectations of what they can do for each other and research can do for them. So we've had a long tradition of action research for natural enthusiasts and maybe convertible cynics. We think, we've done an estimate, we think there's 39,500 teachers in England in the last 2 years done inquiry projects with national funding behind it in one scheme or another. So we've come a long way in 13 years. Because you want to connect it with students' research and you want your learning to be driven by your aspirations for your students, it's really handy to think about a few students, not all the students all the time. And that if you think about a few students, you can then have really big aspirations for the kinds of evidence you collect and how deep you can go in thinking about why things work.
Well, I'd like to see teacher learning, or sort of expectations about teacher learning, to be as ingrained as expectations about student learning. I was thinking the other day, actually, we should have a new slogan, teaching as a learning profession. I would really like to see the conditions and understanding of how teachers learn being part of the bigger system, so that we're not sending teachers off to one-day courses that we know don't work. And we are giving teachers similar conditions that the students get, and I was mentioned the work of Bransford and Donovan and Copping as a whole after authors. They say how people learn, and they're saying students and teachers learn in very similar ways. That there's the engagement of their prior knowledge, their values, their assumptions, and for teachers that would be about how students learn, what their students are capable of, how best to teach them, what curriculum is valued. And then their second principle is that the new knowledge they gain is done at a deep level, and it's both factual knowledge, and that comes where the research is, and conceptually, that teachers really given the opportunity to understand these ideas at a really deep level, so that it's easily retrieved, because teachers have to make moment-by-moment decisions all the time in their classrooms. And so they've got to be able to draw on that knowledge automatically. And the third one is partly what I was referring to before in the inquiry cycle I was describing, as a self-regulation, that they know whether they're having the impact, they know what they don't know. And I think you've called it something slightly different in the Source for the Goose, that it's the same idea, that they have the right and to be unsure. They have the right to say, well, it might not have worked, but let's try again with the knowledge they need. So I'd like to see that in 5 years' time, that the teacher learning is expected as much as student learning.
We share an awful lot of thinking there, and a lot of that's in that pamphlet about Source for the Goose, which is saying we cared so desperately and we put loads of planning and thought into the learning of our students. What right have we to set up learning activities for teachers without giving it the same amount of care and planning, and that we need a pedagogy for CPD, and actually we need a curriculum for the folk who support CPD. So that they need to model professional learning too, that